Hello again. So this is the third section of the week 1 lecture on foundations of research methods. With me again, Dr. Yanda Chandra. Today we're going to talk, in this section, we're going to talk about hypothesis. So remember, hypothesis, I've partly talked about it in the sections on truth and on theory. In relation to theory, hypothesis is obviously a very integral part of the theory that you are developing and you are testing. So hypothesis is actually something that you need to say out of your research model. You state it explicitly so that you can test it. So I put here one definition of a hypothesis, which is actually a guess, an educated guess, a conjecture about a logical relationship between two or more variables expressed in a form of testable statements. So what does it mean to be a logically developed relationships? It means that you need to show that there is a prior relationship between two or more variables. So for example, if I'm studying something about being creative will lead you to be a better performing company, then I need to find some literature to support this, that there is a relationship between creativity in the company and the company's performance, right? And why do you need to have two or more variables? Can you just have one variable? Think about it for a few seconds. Can you just do one variables in a hypothesis? That will sound like factor X or variable X has a positive or negative relationship with nothing else. so it's impossible to have a hypothesis with only one variable. So you need at least to have two, right? Just like you have at least two person, so you can have a spark. So you need to have at least two or more variables. You can have 3 or 4 or 5 hypothesis variables in one or more hypotheses that you're studying. So the key part to that is, for example, if you're studying what makes a certain employees to perform really well in their company, and then you selected 1,000 companies and you pick 2% from each company who are the best performer in their company, and you ask each of them to fill in your survey, and you only ask basically one question: what is your performance? How good is it? That's it. You don't ask other questions. Can you make a hypothesis out of that? Of course no, right? Of course no. So you need to have 2 or more. And the second part is your hypothesis has to be in a testable statement. So how you say it in a sentence is really important. So when you say it's logically developed, you need to have some literature to back you up, to find or to express the relationship between two or more variables. Testables means that you can really collect data to confirm or to verify whether your hypothesis is true or false, or supported or not supported. So you need to write it in a proper way. There are some really bad ways to write hypothesis. There are best practices, and there are many sort of guidance on this. We're going to have a look at these things step by step as we go forward. So hypothesis is actually a statement about a prediction about something, right? So it is something concrete that you expect that will happen in your research. So when people say, I have a hypothesis about why companies are very successful, I have a hypothesis about why civil servants are delivering a great job in public service. So these are actually what we call alternate hypotheses, or the actual hypothesis that you are testing. So for example, if you say there's this new kind of employee training, and if you implement this training program for the employees, it will decrease employees' absenteeism, employees being absent from the company, right? So it can be a problem for some companies. So when you state it out like this, the one at the bottom, this is actually an alternate hypothesis, right? And for every alternate hypothesis, there is a null hypothesis behind it. right? So when you have a null, an alternate hypothesis that says company training program will decrease absenteeism, the null hypothesis of this hypothesis is there is no relationship between training program and absenteeism. And the same thing, if you say, if you take this medicine, this will lead to you being cured from the disease. So this is a form of alternate hypothesis, the kind of hypothesis that you want to test if you're developing a new drug, right? So the H null, or the null hypothesis behind this hypothesis, is there is no relation between this medicine or this new ways of medication with curing a particular disease. So behind every alternate hypothesis, there is a null hypothesis. And when you are doing a statistical analysis, when you are testing your hypothesis using statistics, basically you are trying to confirm or support the alternate hypothesis. And if you support this in your statistical output, you can say, well, this research shows, or this research supports or confirm or offer support to hypothesis 1 or hypothesis 2 or hypothesis 3, in which we can see and then you mentioned the coefficients and the p-value and all things. So don't worry about the details. We're going to look at that in the following weeks. But the key part here, there is always H null behind it. And you're actually trying to refute H null. You're trying to defeat or refute the H null in your hypothesis testing. Because if you find support for your alternate hypothesis, in the same way you are refuting the null hypothesis. So these are some examples of hypotheses from actual research that have been published. The first two is actually by authors by Zara and her colleagues, is an entrepreneurship paper in which they're studying the relationship between international corporate entrepreneurship, ICE, and how it's associated with financial performance. And they say the relationship is positive. So which means that they're proposing that if ICE goes up, the financial performance of the company will also go up. If this go down, this also go down. So this is what it means with this hypothesis, right? And in the second hypothesis, which is more interesting. So typically when you add some moderator or mediator effect to that, it's more interesting. So in H2, this hypothesis says that the relationship between the international corporate entrepreneurship and the company performance will be moderated by international environmental hostility. So that hostility is another variable that affect the relationship between ICE and performance. So ICE is the main independent variable. The company performance is the main dependent variable you are testing. The environmental hostility is another variable, what we call moderator. We're going to look at this in the following week. So the key part to this hypothesis is actually the last part, which is the firms that pursue ICE in an international environment with high levels of hostility. So if they kiss, so high ICE and high hostility, which it will make the company to have better financial performance in terms of higher profit and higher growth. So it is this kind of interaction that this hypothesis is trying to examine. And it is up to you, up to us as a researcher to define what kind of hypothesis to test. And this is related to some theory that you are trying to test. So if you are trying to build some new contributions to test something that people have not done, you always try to find something new or something counterintuitive that people thought is impossible, people thought is not important, or people have not considered. And this is what you wanted to test. And if you can do that, you're actually adding contributions to research. And we'll talk about contributions later in section 5 of the lecture. And the other two are a paper by Long, who is my colleagues in City University of Hong Kong. He's very interested and curious whether people who have taken economics classes will be more likely to be more greedy and less fair to other people. So he had two hypotheses. The first one is increases in economics education will be associated, which is a positive relationship with greedy action, and negative relationship with fairness, which means that people will become less fair to others if they have more economics education. So this is the first hypothesis. Actually, this one can be broken down into two if you want. So increased economic education will be increasing greedy, will be associated with increasing greedy action. First hypothesis, and you can have increases in economic education will be associated with decreasing concern for fairness. I will speed I will split that into two to make it even clearer and easier to make the justification and explaining the results later. And his second hypothesis, increasing economics education will be associated with increasing positive perceptions of greed. So what this is saying is people who have taken more courses on economics will see greed as something positive. So actually, this study is very counterintuitive, and this is why it got published in one of the top academic management journals, because they're showing something that people have not looked at, which is economics education will make people more greedy and less fair and perceive greed as something positive. So it's very interesting revelation. So this is some examples of hypothesis. So I stop it there. And if you have any questions, you can always rewind and review this lecture or look at the other two previous sections on truth and theory. So I hope that's a useful session for you on hypothesis. Bye.